Zinc Comics presents, live from Darshan Studios, Exposition with Payne. Welcome to the show today, our special Saturday edition. We're doing it on Saturday because a couple of my guests couldn't make it tomorrow, so you get us all a day early. In the studio with us today is I'm joined by Mauricio Cordero and also the amazing David Brame. Welcome to the program, folks.
Whoa. Hello.
Okay. One reason I had you both on here will become apparent in this first question. And David, according to Jeff Dyer, you are a former college professor who quit his day job to draw comics. And Mauricio, you teach a course on comic book creation at MIT. Can you both tell me a little more about your comic book adventures in academia? And please bear in mind that I merely have a high school education. Let's start with you, David.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess my comic book adventures were it all started with actually being an illustrator first, and then sort of needing a job post my I would say my educational career before I developed an academic career. And so I started teaching in the University of Cincinnati, and then moved on to Ryerson University in Toronto. And I was actually in a fashion program there, doing design work there. And what I was trying to do, I guess, like comics were always my first love, so I was trying to figure out a way to marry the worlds of design, fashion, and doing more scholarly academic work. And so that ended up like Ryerson University has like a lot of little fingers in Toronto. So you can sort of connect with lots of people. So I ended up connecting with a whole host of individuals. So I was doing things like educational books. That's really where it started clicking. Was I was making sort of these educational books. So I was working with doctors. I was working with other like sort of indigenous groups to make work there. And as well as trying to figure out how to do the type of comics that weren't necessarily academic or are design focused, but more sort of my own ideas. And sort of I guess that's where I started, and I continued through my my academic career. But then eventually I got to the point where I felt that I made it to associate professor, and I felt that the academic load was taking away from my comic work, and it wasn't. I was spending more time doing, I would say, doing scholarly academic work, and not really addressing the thing that I really wanted to do, which was to be like a really dope artist. Like that's all I wanted to do, was to draw. So that's kind of where like how I got to the point where I wanted to start doing this full time. And from there I started freelancing full time, and since then it's actually been pretty great. I have a lot of books coming out, and that's been working.
I just wanted to reiterate. So originally you were teaching like fashion design and fashion illustration?
Yeah, I ended up. I was actually before any of all of this. I mean, I liked doing comics. Like that was what I wanted to do. But I always had a comic angle. I was told you can't make money and you can't have a career being a comic artist. So it was I tried painting, I tried all this other stuff, but fashion illustration and doing fashion design, I was making a lot of money from. And from there, that's actually how I got connected with Ryerson University. They had a position open in Toronto. I interviewed and did well. And so I ended up starting, I got hired in as being a digital fashion illustrator. That's what I was doing, was teaching digital fashion illustration. But I ended up doing everything. You kind of, once you're a full-time instructor, like a full-time professor, you're like, I was doing, design work, I was doing history, I was doing like, theater and all these other little pieces that weren't, I would say, in my skill set. But I ended up mostly connecting with the world of fashion via trying to be a fashion illustrator. And like, that was like how I made money, when I was in undergrad.
Well, that's really cool. I always had a soft spot in my head for fashion illustration, because I could tell that there was like an overlap in the two. And I used to know a guy who did that. And I used to look at his drawings and say, I wish I could draw like that, So that's a really interesting trajectory. Now, Mauricio, let's go with you. The fact that you're at MIT teaching comics just blows my mind. So bring that into focus and tell us how that works.
Well, it blows my mind too. How does it work? Well, Professor James Parody has a course that he's been teaching for years on the graphic novel, and so it's a deep reading course in the comparative media studies department. And he just put out a call to a few of his colleagues, wanting to find someone to come in and just do a brief hands-on maker course within a course. And so I stepped up. I said I could do it, even though I wasn't sure how I'd go about it. And so I put together a proposal, and in 5 weeks, the students created some short comics. After that experience, I thought, well, I think I could do an entire semester's worth of comics course. And so I developed what's been renamed several times, but is now Making Comics, which is a full semester course. We have students from all over the university taking this course. Last semester, I literally had a rocket scientist in my course. So I can say that making comics is rocket science to some. And it's just grown from there. The students are really happy with the course. They are able to express themselves in a way that they can't in most of their other courses. A lot of students also show up the first day, and I kind of let them know that if they're taking this course because they think it's going to be the easy course for their semester, that they should just turn around and walk out the door, because it's a lot of work. We have a really kind of a grueling schedule. Their first comic is due within 3 weeks of the first meeting. They have a midterm, which is an 8-page comic, and then a final project. And so the midterms and the final projects are actually printed professionally. And so they leave the course with actual physical copies of their comics. So
yeah, I noticed a few of them on Indie Planet. So there we go. That's one of your projects with your students' work, correct?
On the left, the crafting comics.
That is Mauricio's work. On the other side is an illustration I like that I stole from Amazing David's Facebook page. All apologies.
Nice.
I just like people to have some view of what we're talking about. And I'm sure these aren't the images either of you would have chosen, but I think both of them are pretty great. And you did design and illustrate that cover yourself, correct, Mauricio?
Yeah, I do the covers because I just can't ask the students to do anything more than they're already doing in the class.
I actually looked at a few of those on your website. You have PDFs of them, and it's interesting work and very varied as well. So, it's definitely some cool stuff you're creating there at MIT. Okay. And those are still available on Indie Planet, I believe, if anyone wants to purchase them. I'll have a link to that below as well. But enough with the small talk. We really need to talk about Border X, A Crisis in Graphic Detail, Mauricio's current anthology project. You've recently launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise funds to print this publication and for the South Texas Human Rights Center, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Could you tell us about that project?
Sure. Well, in May of 2018, I kind of reached the breaking point with the current political situation in this country. And that, you might remember, was the month where Claudia Patricia Gomez Gonzalez, a 20-year-old accountant from Guatemala, was shot in the head by border guards minutes after she crossed into the U.S. border. And for months, I was just kind of reeling as I read story after story of abuses at the border, all the things that I'm sure everyone else has read about, the kids in cages, the family separation, the just flaunting of the law and in this just lawless, reckless policy that the current administration, which I don't like to say that jerk's name. So that administration just seemed to be creeping into everything. And I started creeping into a lot of comics. I did comics about that orange blob, and it just wasn't satisfying. I felt dirty after I drew pictures of him. And I thought, well, I want to do something about this. And it has to be bigger than myself. And so around more like August of this past year, I just started asking around and asked locally a few comics folks up in Massachusetts, where I was at the time. And we had a meeting with about 8 participants and just discussed the project, what my goals were. And it seemed pretty viable at that point. Little did I know what awaited me in terms of work and just changes to the initial vision. And then quickly after, I started to look at a few agencies that I thought should benefit. And naturally, the first agency I looked at was Raíces, who is doing wonderful work, just really necessary, important, vital work. However, in one day, they made $12 million with one Facebook post. So I thought, well, there's got to be someone out there who's doing important work and whose mission could actually be changed by a relatively small project. And that's when I started to dig. And someone sent me a list from the ACLU in Texas. And that's where I first heard of the South Texas Human Rights Center. So I looked into it. They had a really small budget, but a big mission. They put watering stations along the border with clean water for migrants as they cross. And this is in an area of Texas that is just really one of the roughest places you could imagine. One of the worst places to cross. It's in Falfurrias, Texas. And so the water is really vital, obviously, to anyone who's making that treacherous journey. They also have a search and rescue program where families of migrants who are crossing can alert the South Texas Human Rights Center, and they can dispatch people who will focus on rescuing rather than arresting people who have found themselves in over their heads. And sadly, the last part of their mission is forensic recovery, because a lot of people do die in their attempt to seek a better life. And so they are one of the few agencies there who are identifying remains and trying to repatriate bodies with their families. So it's not something we like to think about, really, but I thought a very bold and necessary mission. And so that's where it started.
That's a great project. I think I became aware of it. I don't know if you made an open call, but I think BP Johnson tagged me
Uh-huh.
in something you had posted. It was either that or Dean Westerfield. One of those two is, I think, how I became aware of it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I've been following your progress since then. And I figured, that, as I said, I'm not a media influencer, but I figure every little bit helps. And having you on to talk about your project, and I'll post a link to that project and the fundraiser below as well. So hopefully some people will be inspired to help a brother out and help the people south of the border. And I think it's a very worthwhile project. I think the stuff you're doing at MIT is cool too, but it doesn't have quite the humanity and resonance of this and timely need for it. So I think it's really a great project, and I wish you nothing but success. Have you had a lot of people coming forth willing to help out?
Absolutely. We have about 50 participants. And I just want to pick up on what you mentioned a second ago about MIT. And you're exactly right. And that is why James Parody and I are working on a new comic course. Well, it's comic space, but it's really about civic engagement in comics around climate change. And this is also serving the Border X project as a model that we hope to be able to kind of package and write up and serve as a model for other people who want to use comics to explore issues and raise money for issues like gender rights or women's rights or whatever it is that people want to address through comics. Because we're also developing a teaching guide, and there are a lot of different components and ways to have the project go beyond just the participants and the people who pick up a copy of the comic. We really wanted to help expand the political discourse into comics a little bit more.
It sounds like a worthy pursuit. And again, the book is Border X, Crisis in Graphic Detail. There'll be a link below the show to donate to the cause and to order your copy. So I suggest you all do that.
And to get involved. We're still looking for more artists and writers. So just get in touch, and we'd love to have more people on board.
All you cartoonists listening out there, get in touch with Mauricio. Okay, now again, I think this is another connection. We go from the crisis at the border to south of the border. David, you're currently living in rural Mexico, are you not?
Yeah, correct. I'm living in a town called Tazo. It's in the state of Guerrero. we're about 2.5 hours south of Mexico City, and it's deep in the mountains, and it's not easy to get to from anywhere, but it's pretty great. I guess it's not as far away as as Alaska, but it's I'm in Mexico right now, and I would actually say my work right now is not connected to Mexico. I live there, and it's for me it was part of moving there is because of what Mauricio was talking about. You know, you come into contact with some things that are not just acceptable for your life, and having a resident Cheeto in charge doesn't I guess vibe well with my politics, and being in Mexico has been pretty great for developing my work right now.
Sounds like a good time to me. I'm sure it's beautiful there. You're one of the few people I've ever had on my show, David, who I've actually met in person, albeit briefly and just for a moment or two. But but since we hooked up and got to know each other, and I've been following you, you should have a show called Have Tablet Will Travel, because I've lived vicariously through you as you've traveled the world, while I'm sitting here in my little box at the top of the stairs in Alaska. So, I mean, I think you've been in Africa. You've been in. You go back to Toronto some, and you've been all over. And I'm like, drawing comics on the runs. That's a great deal. And I remember when we first met, it was in part for a local mural project sponsored by Katy Perry here in Homer. And during the meeting, you were drawing comics on your tablet the whole time while we talked. So, I'm not digital at all. You're talking to a guy who never learned to drive a car. And I bought myself one of these little Wacom tablets, but I can't figure it out. It took me almost 60 years to learn how to draw with a pen, and it seems like I'm starting all over, but I'll get it down. But I bought this book, Magna Studio for Dummies, and the text is still too dense for me. So, or maybe I'm too dense for the text, but anyway, I was kind of like watching over your shoulder during that meeting, because I've never really watched someone draw comics digitally. So it was really cool to see that. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, like we met in Homer, Alaska. Yeah, there was this mural project. One of another local, Abigail Koka, who's like another artist. I guess she's become a local artist in Homer, Alaska, and she invited me to come hang out for.
David, we just lost you. Come in, David. He mentioned that. Are you back?
Am I back?
Yeah, you cut out there for a moment. You were talking about Abigail, our mutual friend, and then you cut out. You had come to hang out in Homer. Continue.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I was coming to hang out and work on this the mural project. I guess it's. Am I still there?
You're cutting in and out, but I hate to tell you this, but both the murals that you and I were involved in are gone.
They got rid. Wow.
ours got painted over by another mural artist in town, and ours was kind of a combination of errors from the get-go. I thought I was just drawing this little head for them to use as a reference, and they ended up acting like I was designing the whole mural, and I was like, no, that wasn't what I thought we were doing. But that one got painted. I remember at the showing of it, nobody wanted to take credit for it. I didn't feel like I could, so it was kind of funny. But yours, I really thought was great, but they did some remodeling to that strip mall there. And I think they tore down that entire retaining wall and built up a smaller one. And of course, they painted a mural on it, but it's nothing compared to that masterpiece you whipped up. I really liked what you did there. So, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I figured, somebody got to break it to you. So,
well, I guess that's one of the things about street art is that it is, impermanent.
Ephemeral, yes. It's an ephemeral art form, correct. Yeah. So, how about you, Mauricio? Do you work traditionally, or are you a digital artist as well?
Oh, I'm just, I guess, schizo. I do everything and anything. I'll start, working on paper and end up digital. Sometimes I do rough sketches on paper and scan those and go over those with digital inks. Sometimes I start straight on the tablet. And I grew up with computers. My dad was a programmer, so I think I got my first computer, when I was about 10 or 12. So I'm pretty comfortable with analog and digital. But my drawing started actually when you bring home these gigantic reams of paper from the office, computer printout paper. So I learned to just love to draw large scale and lying on the kitchen floor, and I sometimes still do that.
Yeah. How about you, David? Did you, I'm sure you started off, like you said, you were drawing and painting, you tried everything. When did you go to digital and go through your process a little?
I switched to digital. I guess in some ways I was similar. I had a really lucky art-based childhood. So I started doing digital work, way back in Photoshop 3, maybe Photoshop 2. Look on the old school Apple IIs. So I started way back then. Sort of incorporating digital aspects, both in design and as an illustrator into my work. But I fully went into digital when I started to travel, because it was such a necessary part. To be able to go and see the world as well as do the work at the same time. I actually used to travel with a scanner and a big pack of paper and all of my paints and inks and all of the things that have now become sort of embedded in a tablet. I used to just carry around in this extra suitcase with me when I went and traveled, and it was it got to be too much and of a problem. So I guess I fully switched to digital about maybe 5 years ago, and and I would say it was in ways it was being a baby again. In some ways, even though I have this world where I've been using tablets and digital and Photoshop and lots of different programs, you have to sort of relearn how you're using how you can use the program itself as an extension of you as an artist, and so I do a little bit of everything, and a lot of it started out as how do I, as a traditional artist, because I'm more of an installation artist and a painter, and how do I switch that work into or incorporate that and create sort of a digital framework, if you will, like, or a digital identity of that. Since then, it's been pretty great to try to sort of relearn whatever those techniques are finding a different way to use different techniques to get the same kinds of look that you would have if you were just holding a brush, or if you were just holding a pen or something like that. So it's been pretty great recently.
Well, with your techniques, I've noticed that all your projects, although they have your look, they're slightly different. Like I first became aware of you, I think after we met, I was looking for something and I found you on Webtoons, Emerald Acres. Do you remember this project?
Oh, wow.
Am I dating you?
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think that was like a decade ago. I think we made that when I was still in undergrad. Like, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, that's the thing with the internet. It never goes away. And, I tracked you down. And now I'm going to just name off a couple of your books and you can riff off that real quick, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. First, what's Graphic Poetics Incorporated? Is that your just publishing company or brand or studio?
Yeah, it's all of those things. When I was trying to sort of like develop an identity for how I want to be a comic artist, I created Graphic Poetics. I was I still am a poet, and a writer, as well as being an artist. And a lot of my work while I was doing scholarly work incorporated lots of pieces of poetry, and then marrying that with imagery and drawing, and sort of a lot of visual aesthetic that I was trying to incorporate. So so Graphic Poetics was sort of the baby that came out of that. And there's one book we had published based off of some grant. I can't remember the names, but we had a book published called Why Birds Don't Throw Stones at Wolves. And this was published by Graphic Poetics. We had to create the imprint, as it were, based on that, and then that became sort of the identity I was trying to pursue, and I still am trying to pursue for my personal work, is to find a way, and I guess not find a way, but create work that marries the graphic side of illustration and the poetic side of illustration. I guess you could say it's in some ways they're opposites. So poetry itself is it's the written word, and sometimes be spoken word. But the way that my poetry works is generally very visual, and I guess you could say it's very ephemeral, and you can touch it and feel it in the way that it works. And my visuals are very they're poetic, they're lyrical. The type of line and the type of marks that I make had that same feeling of poetry, and so there's this they're conjoined in a way, these ideas.
Well, no, I don't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, I was thinking, this reminds me of what I've been doing for quite some time now. I also started out a writer. I came to comics really late, I didn't read comics as a kid. I was a hooligan, and I didn't get into comics until I was asked to letter one when I was in a sign painting class. And while lettering one, I kind of learned how it was done, and I thought, well, I can do this. So I was always kind of a frustrated filmmaker. But I like what you say about the combination of poetry and comics, because to me, I think it was Seth, the cartoonist, Palookaville, and who mentioned that comic strips, the 3-panel comic strip, is like a haiku. It's got 3 beats, and it's limited words, and so a few years back, my wife is also a poet. We used to do some slam poetry together in our younger days. And she wrote me for a birthday. I was turning 52, and she wrote me 52 haikus. And, oh, wow. And so I thought, well, there's 52 weeks in a year. So I drew 52 strips using those haikus. But rather than illustrate the haikus, I just drew pretty girls reciting them. That's have to get my kicks too. And
right.
And so I've done, like, I think I'm on my 4th 52 project right now. She writes the haikus, and so I'm over 200 in. And her last series of haikus was about death. And so I thought life drawings combined with death haikus just seemed like a perfect juxtaposition, even though they're like opposite sides of the coin. Like they say, when you're born, you're going to die, so the two things went together. And that's what I've been currently doing as a project for my Patreons. But I like the idea that comics as poetry, because when I do a strip, I definitely think of it as a poem. When I draw a page, I think of it as a paragraph. And then the story is a short story. I don't like the term graphic novel, but if I ever did one, it would be chapters. Each, there would be a chapter and outline going. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the poetry subject. You got me thinking there, which is always dangerous. Okay. How about you, Mauricio? Do you have any solo work out that we could look at, or is it all usually tied in with a project and teaching?
Well, right now I'm working on a solo project that I don't know when it'll see the light of day, but it's called Taco Tank, and it's a sort of a dystopic utopia set in the future. And the last project I published was quite a while ago. It was in what was it called? It was Double Nickels Forever, which was a tribute to the Minutemen, band that I grew up listening to, and there were about 52 comic artists who participated, and we each did a song.
What tune did you do?
Oh, Corona, my favorite song.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm familiar with that project, and I'm a big fan of Watt. So, your cool points just went up a notch by telling me you were in that 52 project in that book. What's the title of it again?
It's called Double Nickels Forever.
Okay.
And I just saw Watt about 3 weeks ago here in San Francisco. Amazing show.
Yeah, he's on tour, so yeah, good deal. Okay, we're going to get back to that stream of conscious thing with you, David. I'm going to name a book, and you're going to just tell us a little bit about it, okay?
Okay.
Okay. The one that I always see associated with your name is medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Medicine was a book that was published by Action Lab Comics about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And it was a book that was written by Jeff Dyer, and then had it was co-written by Mark McKeown. I hope I'm saying his name right. But he was a medical doctor, and so he was providing all the medical information. But generally, the take on the book is it was a book about doctors who provided healthcare for supervillains. Like the idea is like, what happens after if the Joker gets away, after he gets punched in the face or he gets broken up by Batman, who's the one that's providing the healthcare for these villains and these supervillains. So that is the general take on that book. And so yeah, we worked hard on that, and I think it was like 6 issues, and it was beautifully colored by Joaquin Pereira, who's he's a colorist and an artist, and I believe he's in Argentina. I hope if he hears that and I say the wrong country, I hope he won't be upset. But yeah, so that was that book, and it was it was a great thing to work on, and I got to invent all these weird little characters and sort of work on like sort of a new and an inventive style for that book. So yeah, that was that.
Yeah, I like how during the fight scenes you have there's like broken fibula, ruptured spleen and stuff like that written as text boxes. I thought that was funny. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was gonna say it kind of reminds me a lot of the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movie, where like you get sort of this would be like the comic version of that, but like it's like if this was a movie or another piece of like cinema or something like that, this would be like the crack, or this would be like the the intimate information you get when you're breaking something or whatever.
I got the reference immediately when you said the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movie. I can see the correlation. Okay.
Yeah. Correlation.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, another book, Bad Mothers, and I do mean Bad Mothers.
Yeah. Bad Mothers. This book was published actually last year. Actually, we debuted it at Toronto Comic Arts Festival, 2018. Actually, no, it was last year, 2019. I've done a lot, and oh man, it's wild. It's this sort of psychedelic, funkified version of like how to sort of tell a space story. It's the tagline is basically there's my writer always tells me the tagline and I always mess it up. I always make it too long, but it's an all-woman funk band who double as space pirates, and they end up having to fight I guess the leader of the universe, who is the deer that also looks like Prince. It's very dense to try to explain this, but to me, it's just wild. It's like it's one big shout out to black exploitation and mexploitation, and
We lost you again, David. Sounds like it's black exploitation with a touch of Josie and the Pussycats too.
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's black exploitation at its best. It's all like it's just non sequiturs and like homages to music, like music and sort of art from the 1970s, and I don't know. It's just a wild sci-fi ride. It's psychedelic and it's like beautiful and it's crazy, and there's a lot of like action, which is always fun. So it feels
like
kind of
fun book.
Yeah, it's like if Pam Grier, was in a comic about space smugglers.
Okay, I got one more for you, and I'm gonna mangle the name. I mean, I can't even say correlation. In Snana the Were Spider.
Oh yeah, it's Nana the were spider. Yeah, I just recently developed a relationship with Greg Anderson Elise. He's a Haitian comic book writer from Brooklyn, and he created this character as Nana that and if you say it backwards, it's a Nazi. So like most people don't even get that, but he's Anansi the spider, the
Right.
teller of stories, the African teller of stories. So it's a it's sort of like a horror slash like adventure action book, and I've done like a few installments of it. So I've done some issues and some. We have like a new like a short anthology coming out soon from a funded Kickstarter called Modern Mythologies, and we have like a short 15, 16 page story there based on this character. But he's he's the son of Anansi, the storyteller, and he's got magical powers, and he's sort of been thrust into the real world and not into sort of the magical mythical realm, African realm, and he sort of deals with coming of age because he's a teenager and learning how to use his powers and all of these kinds of things. And one of the big things about it is that he's not supposed to be Peter Parker. He's not Spider-Man. He's not just like African Spider-Man. He's got his own mythos and his own set of cast of characters in Rogues Gallery, and it's really wild. But you should definitely check out. And if you ever find, or not if you ever, you can find it everywhere. It's a really popular book right now. He sells it online, and he's at a lot of cons. Greg is, and if you can read some Isnana, it's a beautiful book. Even if I didn't do some of the drawings for some of the volumes, it's really well written, and it's engaging and intriguing, and I think it's like new comics. It's like speculative, black fiction, and it has its own its own feel, and it's been really wonderful being able to add to the mythos of Isnana.
Now, did I hear you say you had a Kickstarter going currently for?
No, we actually got that funded already.
Okay.
I haven't had a Kickstarter going in a while. I mean, I've been contributing to them, but I've been mostly working on a lot of new work that's going to be published soon. So that's been my
Okay, I'm
time.
under the impression that you got an Indiegogo, or at least something you helped out with, that ends tomorrow. Miseria Loves Company.
Yeah, Miseria Loves Company. Yeah, that was written by Josh Gorfain. He's one of the writers. He's a New York writer. And it escaped me the book that they just got funded. It was sorry, but yeah, Miseria Loves Company. We were working on something like that where it kind of started out as like he was sort of sort of in the doldrums of creativity, and we were having like sort of a chit chat on Facebook, and I just threw out this idea. I was like, hey, so give me 8 pages. I don't care what it is. I'll make it look beautiful. send it to me, and I'll put it out, and then you can put it out, and then we'll see what goes from there. Like, I wanted him. He's like a really good artistic buddy for me. So I was hoping to give him in a way like a kick in the butt of like, hey, we're creators. You can't just like rest on your laurels. If you can stave off the depression with just another project, then it's like to me it's a pretty good antidepressant. just do more work. So yeah, we put out Miseria Loves Company, which is and the idea is this sort of the god of despair, and she gets her despair wherever sort of transports her to people who are really feeling this sort of desperation, and the book that we put out is just sort of it starts off as like it's just a conversation with this guy who's about to commit suicide, and so that's the Indiegogo that we're putting out, is this conversation, and we're hoping that it connects to a larger project. So like we're hoping that it he can use that money so we can put it towards I think he's written it like a 6-page story arc is what he's interested in. So
okay, well
yeah.
I'll put the link to that below. Now
that would be awesome.
Okay. Now David hardly said 2 words when I met him. He's a verbose cat, so it turns out. I'm gonna turn back to Mauricio. We got about 7 minutes left, so is there anything you want to discuss that we did not, or you would like to expand upon? Anything that David said or that you said earlier at this time?
Well, I found it interesting talking about poetry and how that translates into comics. And I too started as a poet down in Richmond, Virginia, believe it or not, with a bunch of punk rockers, guys from bands like Guar, and it was just a wonderful mess. And we developed a thing called slam poetry, which is very, very different from poetry slams in that we actually slammed one another to the ground if we didn't enjoy the poems. But anyhow, so that was my beginning in poetry. And when teaching comics, I do have students look at each individual thought they want to put down on the page as if it was a phoneme, as if it was a sound or a part of a language. And I really approach comics as a language course more than a art or anything else course. And we really struggle to find out, in this particular instance, when looking at the students' work, how is the visual sound going to serve the content of the story best. And so we really kind of struggle with these things that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I don't know what the answers are. But just putting it in a context like poetry um, just somehow communicates a lot of things that I can't really express or articulate very well as a professor, but the students get it. And I really enjoy seeing that that rhythm and that the gridding and the scansion of the page just grow and expand throughout their projects. So I'm really a proponent of looking at the page as poetry, as language, as something besides just a bunch of little drawings and squares and rectangles.
I think that's
Yeah.
good. Okay, David, shoot. What were you going to
Oh,
say?
yeah. I was just, connecting with that. Like, I mean, I believe it's the same thing. Like, I once had a professor tell me, like, I was trying to, change like the gutter spacing and like sort of think more of like how paneling works as music or its musicality, like, and once had a professor say like, oh no, it's supposed to be this like very specific type of grid, and I'm like, but no, this like the way that you place these things is like, it's visual sound, how people are going to work with like whether the panel is on top of itself or underneath, or this is, you can kind of think of it as like, types of syncopation, types of rhythm and meter, it's all of these sort of things, but it's the visual aspects of how comics work. And I often use like music, like to help I guess describe or like to channel how I'm going to be drawing the page. Like if I'm listening to jazz while I'm designing, that affects the way that I choose to like order each panel or how I'm going to do the pacing. So yeah, I really connect to that. The way that you described that, Mauricio.
Cool.
Again, I'm feeling it's like that old joke by George Goebel. You ever feel like a pair of brown shoes in a closet full of tuxedos? That's kind of how I'm feeling right now, fellas. But I used to be in a band, and I was the lyricist, and I'm always reminded of something Bob Dylan said, and that's like I don't even when I write a song, I don't even know what it's going to say. I just trust that it will turn out okay, and that's kind of how I am as a cartoonist. And maybe that's why I'm where I am, and you cats are, you know, in academia and living the life in rural Mexico at the moment. Again, Mauricio, can you just give us one more hard sell on your book, your current project, and then it's going to be the end of the show?
All right, bleeding heart liberals, come on, do the right thing. Buy this book. I mean, really, you're going to get some incredible artwork, incredible stories. We've got a lot of little goodies that we're producing. We're even producing a skateboard that's going to be illustrated by Walter Sickert, the Walter Sickert of Walter Sickert and the Army of Broken Toys. And most of the money, I'm estimating, it's hard to say until we really get all the money in, but about 70 to 80% will go to the South Texas Human Rights Center. And so it's tremendous. No one's getting a paycheck. We're all doing this as a donation. So if you're working on a comic, I really look at it as you're pulling your checkbook out and writing us a check for thousands of dollars, because the artwork is so valuable that's going in this, and your time is so valuable. So it just, I want anyone out there that's a consumer of comics to honor that work and just give us a few bucks and help change some lives.
Border X, A Crisis in Graphic Detail. Kick it. Okay, thanks, fellas, for joining me on the show today. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been another episode of Exposition. I'm your host, Brian Payne. Until next time, remember, think Zinc.